I would like to call this meeting of the School District 72 Board of Education public meeting to order. Good evening. I acknowledge on behalf of the Board of Trustees that this meeting is being held on the traditional territory of the Likwitah people. I am John Kerr, Chairperson of the School District 72 Board of Education. In attendance virtually this evening is Vice Chair Kat Eddy and Trustees Joyce McMahon, Susan Wilson, Daryl Hagan, Shannon Briggs, and Richard Franklin. Also in attendance are Superintendent Jeremy Morrow, Associate Superintendents Morgan Kyle and Phil Sismic, as well as Secretary Treasurer Kevin Patrick. Present also are Natalie Crawshaw, Assistant to the Secretary Treasurer, Jennifer Patrick, Manager of Communications, and providing technical support is Barbara Drake, Manager of IT. Please note there is a 3-minute production delay between the live event that you are viewing and the meeting participants. The question and answer function is open for questions on the agenda items for this virtual meeting. Questions that are posed during the meeting will be addressed at the end of the session. The board continues to meet in a virtual format on the direction of District Health Officer's office through the Environmental Safety Officer. This step was taken in order to maintain compliance with the Provincial Health Provincial Health Officer, Dr. Bonnie Henry's order, which restricts the board's ability to meet in person. The board will continue to meet virtually until such time as it is given direction that in-person meetings are permitted. Our board continues to take precautions and to make accommodations where possible to protect the health and safety of all members of our learning community. This long weekend has passed. COVID-19 numbers have continued to decline on the North Island. Staff has had the opportunity to be vaccinated, and the school year is in its final phase. Due to unfortunate circumstances, the traditional graduation ceremonies will not take place this year. Perhaps next year there can be a return to the way that our families and schools can recognize this important milestone in the lives of our graduating young men and women. That being said, our district and schools will be recognizing the achievements of our graduates in other ways. On behalf of the Board of Education, I offer the graduates our best wishes for success in whatever path they choose to follow in the future. Tonight, the board will be presented with and vote upon the proposed annual budget bylaw in the amount of slightly more than $73 million. This is a serious matter and the core of the board's business. Without a budget that reflects the priorities of the board, the essential foci of the strategic plan could not be addressed. We have been fortunate over the years to have strong financial management in this district, and despite increased costs, the district has been able to weather the financial vicissitudes of funding that does not completely address the needs of providing an education for almost 5,500 students. I acknowledge the efforts of our Secretary Treasurer and his team to consult with the district stakeholders, to hear their concerns and wishes, to reconcile those requests with the resources the district has available to meet, and to manage the district's finances in a prudent manner over the years, especially during this past year. Over the past 6 years, the district has had in place a 10-year facilities review plan. Among the aspects of this plan is the seismic upgrade or replacement of Cedar Elementary, a facility that was built in the 1950s and early 1960s. Cedar Elementary is in the poorest condition of any district facility and one of the facilities in poorest condition across the province. Despite the heroic efforts of the maintenance department to keep the building in good repair, the ravages of time have taken their toll on a school that was built when construction, seismic, energy conservation standards, and educational practices were far different than they are now. The district has had the seismic upgrade or replacement of Cedar Elementary at the top of its capital requests for the past 6 or more years, but these requests have not been addressed. The board believes now is the time to bring this to the attention of the Minister of Education so that this issue can be addressed in a timely fashion. More details will be forthcoming within a short period of time. Finally, I would like to recognize the efforts of our district staff to provide the best conditions possible for our students' learning over the past year and to wish everyone a successful final month to this uncertain school year. Okay, we shall move to the superintendent's remarks.
Thank you very much, Chair Kerr. I would like to start my comments tonight by thanking Dave Harper, the current president of the CRDTA, for his service on behalf of teachers, and to wish him all the best in his retirement at the end of the school year. I would also like to congratulate Deborah Coombs, current teacher at Carey High Secondary, who is the incoming CRDTA president. And I look forward to welcoming and working with Deborah in her new role. I would like to express some gratitude to Chelsea Badger, teacher at Penfield, who has started a virtual running club that involves a number of elementary schools and quite a number of elementary school students. It's just another example, like we've seen so many over the past 15 months, where our staff have creatively and thoughtfully found ways to provide unique opportunities for students in spite of some of the limitations that COVID has created. There is a full complement of summer school programs that will be starting on July the 5th. Registration for students and families will begin sometime in early June. Specific program and student opportunities will be provided as soon as they become available, and we're one of the few districts that provides a full complement of summer school activities, and of course those will be in alignment with the COVID protocols. I mentioned it at the last board meeting, but wanted to put in another plug to support Carey High's musical. They're presenting Disney's Little Mermaid. The shows will be online June 1st through 5th and June 10th to 12th, and you can purchase tickets, and they're available, the link on the website. And again, just another opportunity, and the reason why I wanted to mention it again is because of the tremendous effort that our students and staff go to produce this musical, and of course, it's not easy to go to all that work and not have a live audience, so really wanting to see as many people as possible connect to and purchase tickets to support the students in the program this year and the ongoing work of that program. With the current public health measures that are in place, even with today's updated measures, graduations at all 3 schools will not look the same as they have in traditional years, be much more similar to how they looked last year. Each school in our district will be communicating with their families around those specifics, but one of the pieces that has a real opportunity for a wide community participation in is the Grad Car Parade, which will be taking place on Saturday, June the 26th. And we will make sure that the details about the route and how you can support graduates as they drive through the parade with their families, we'll make sure that that's shared with the community. Again, last year, not just as a superintendent, but as a parent of a graduate, I know how meaningful it was when we couldn't all be together in an arena to celebrate the accomplishments of our young people. To have that community support lining the parade route was quite meaningful for our students. I wanted to circle back as well. Our Phoenix Middle School classroom, Tara Gordon's class, that's been committed to raising money for fresh water in South Sudan. They just received a $1,000 donation from Fresh Slice Pizza in our community, which means they currently have raised just over $6,000 so far as a class. And it's just another example of what an impressive accomplishment a group of young people committed to a cause within a supportive community can accomplish. And lastly, I am pleased to share that since our last board meeting, there have been no additional COVID-19 exposures at any of our schools. And once again, just a reminder that schools continue to reflect what is happening in the community, and we're appreciative of everybody's efforts to keep our schools as safe as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Morrow. Okay, we will move to the approval of the minutes of the meeting of May 11, 2021. The proposed motion, it reads that the minutes of the meeting of May 11, 2021 are hereby approved as circulated. Can we have a mover? Okay, Trustee Franklin, Trustee Eddy. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand. Okay, the motion is passed. There are no dissenting votes. Okay, we will move on to item 4 then. Is there any business arising from the minutes? Hearing none. Are there any additions or alterations to the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we will move to approval of the agenda. The suggested motion is that the agenda is hereby approved as circulated. Can we have a mover for that, please? Trustee Franklin. Trustee Hagan. Okay, all those in favor of the motion, raise your hands. Okay, just waiting for Trustee Briggs. Okay, I didn't see your hand. Okay, opposed? There are none. The motion is carried. Item 7, report of the board decisions from the May 25th, 2021 confidential board meeting. Trustee Eddy.
This evening's confidential board meeting agenda included legal, staffing, and lands discussions. We have completed our agenda and we'll be finished for the evening.
Thank you very much. Okay, there is no correspondence, public submissions, agenda submissions, or education submissions, so we will move to electorate. And sorry, Trustee Hagan, did you have your hand up? You're muted, I can't hear you.
I see under correspondence that we did have an election in the CT, the teachers union. So I thought there would be some recognition there as well, or did I miss that?
That must have got by me. But Superintendent Morrow did address that in his remarks as well. So
I missed the beginning. That's why I'm asking, is because, you know, Dave Harper has done a tremendous job working with us for quite a few years, and I have appreciated his tenacity and sometimes very outspoken attitude, but it's always good to have, you know, a strong person on the other side of the table. And I'm sure that with this new election, we'll have somebody just as strong and just as good, and we're looking forward to working with them. I don't have the correspondence in front of me right now, but congratulations on the election, and thank you, Dave, for all the work that you've done over the years.
I think we all wish Dave a happy retirement, and we all, you know, on behalf of the board, I think we all appreciate his efforts on behalf of his local of the BCTF, the CRDTA, and I think he's going to be missed in the district and in the local. Okay, so further to that, we will move on to electorate and board matters and the draft of the 2021-2022 board meeting schedule. That was in your package as an exhibit. So Secretary Treasurer Patrick, you want to address that?
Yes, sure. I will just share it. So we've presented the board meeting schedule a little differently this year. Natalie was able to show the weeks between. So this year, as you're probably feeling right now, we had 16 meetings, and we actually had a lot of meetings that were 2 weeks apart. The board governance policy does have some determination, which is to try to get the meetings every 3 weeks, not every 2. However, we do try to schedule some board meetings to pass various things like budgets and financial statements that allow staff as much time as they can have to complete the work and get a good quality submission to the board for approval. So we've identified some of those key dates over on the right. Now again, this current year, the 2021, there were 16 meetings, and in 2021-22, there are 13 meetings, but we have been able to try to stick to the 3-week number more so than this year, but you'll notice there are some that are 2 weeks between and a few that are 4 weeks. So so it hopefully doesn't compress them quite as much, and I hope that the reduction in meetings is really made up for by the timeliness of the meetings next year. So, and in some years with how dates fall, we often will go between 14 and 16. So this year, or the proposed schedule is really just down 1 meeting. But again, hopefully the timeliness of the dates really capture all the work that the board needs to do throughout the year.
And if there's a need for any revisions, they can be dealt with as well, can they not?
Oh, absolutely. So for instance, in May, sometimes we have a need for another budget meeting right in the middle of it. And so we may need to schedule that, and we'll review that when we get to the next year's budget schedule. So as I've mentioned earlier, in the budget process this year, we tried some things a little different. And so when we get to preparing the budget schedule for 2022, we may require to add something else, but the board can add additional meetings as needed, and with appropriate notification.
Thank you. Does anyone have any comments or questions on the item? Okay, we will move on to the suggested motion then, and that the suggested motion is that the draft Board of Education meeting schedule for 2021-2022 be adopted as presented. Do we have a mover? Trustee Franklin, Trustee Eddy. Any question or discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay. The opposed? There are none. The motion is carried. We'll move on to the annual budget bylaw for fiscal year 2021-2022. And Secretary Treasurer Patrick.
Okay, so yeah, tonight we're bringing the preliminary budget of 2021-22 to the board for approval. The board is required to pass a budget by June 30th, legislatively required to pass a balanced budget by June 30th. And so this is a process that we began in March and have been working hard on, involving stakeholders and staff, parents, students this year, and it has culminated with a proposal that I brought forward last week, or last meeting, I should say. And at that meeting, we presented this schedule right here, which shows the proposed changes to the budget. As mentioned, we started with a very significant deficit of $1.144 million. And so based on the feedback, it was felt that minimal changes really should occur for next year. So we did have to find some reductions, 100,000 for utilities, 226 for benefits, 100,000 for strategic priorities, and that allowed at least one significant item that was on the suggestions from stakeholders, which was to add middle school counseling, which we were able to do, and one small item for EA mentorship. So now, one thing I do need to point out, though, is when we head into the other schedules, is as we were preparing this budget and getting it into the template that we'll share with you in a little bit, we did notice that there was a pretty sizable error that we had missed. And what that miss was some support staff, some labor support settlement funding that we thought we were getting, we weren't getting. And so we had a lot of work that we needed to do. We pulled the management team together to take a look at the budget and to come up with some options. And so some of the options were to make the necessary reductions to the budget, to ask the board to draw a reserve to make up for that difference. But what we did was we dug into the costs and were able to identify that some of our estimates that we had used for wage increases, for wages between teachers, QP, and benefits were on the higher end. So what we at management made the recommendation that we have incorporated into these amounts, which was to adjust those estimates down to really what what was reflected in the support labor settlement, which was a 2% increase. And so really how this is impacting the budget is in any typical year between a preliminary and a final budget, you'll see that the final budget costs always come in less than the preliminary. When we prepare the budget in February, we don't know which staff is turning over, so we'll keep all the senior experienced staff, but come the final budget, which we'll bring to you in February of next year, we know who has retired, who's turned over, and we'll typically see retiring staff leave with a higher salary than the incoming staff. So so that's why we'll usually see a lower cost in the final. What we did with this, with the adjustment to estimates is we looked at what we expect to happen for our final budget, and we've moved those estimated reductions to the preliminary. And by doing so, we were able to offset that the $1.4 million reduction with minimal cost impacts. But one of the impacts that you will see is, of course, the last meeting I brought forward a draw on unrestricted surplus of $673,000, and being aware that the board had approved $680,000, we're submitting this with a $680,000, and that's just a very small net change from because we were able to offset most of the changes from that 1.4, and I'll point it out when we get to the next spreadsheet. So so I'll go through more of the budget before I ask the board to pass it. So budget comparison. So I know this is really small. Trustees in the have it in your package, but hopefully you can see this well. So so this column right here, the prelim V2, this is our operating budget. This really is my main go-to piece, and for the operating. The budget template, or the budget that we submit, includes capital, special purpose, and operating, but really most of the influence from stakeholder input and board decision is reflected for changes in this operating. So what you can see here, again, with the changes, is we pretty much have about a status quo rollover of staffing from last year to this year, with the expected reduction in cost from some teaching staff that retire. So there's not really any major changes down through here. A lot of savings, both for the targeted savings. A lot of it came out of benefits, but you can see overall the benefit status quo pretty much rolls over. Coming down, looking at other operating amounts, contracts, this really is a change. A lot of the unidentified expenses for Indigenous Ed and International are held here in the contracts column, and so it went up because the expenses haven't been identified yet. Coming and looking at instructional supplies, so this reduction here is just simply a reduction. There were some items last year that were in some like one-time items that had dropped off. This grounds amount, so with stuff being status quo, there actually are two positions in reflected in this, actually, as well as there's our transportation grant has some parking lot changes that we have included in with grounds, which we hadn't done prior. I think, I can't remember, actually we might have had that up in the instructional supplies prior. So really we've shifted some of this from the instructional down to grounds, which is more reflective of where it should be. And then, of course, we have the $100,000 savings that was identified as part of the budget process. So revenues, so here's the $1.4 million. So we have since found out that this 1.4 is actually included in the 2.6. The way this grant is handled, unfortunately, it's not included as part of the grant schedule that we get from the ministry. It has always been a supplement similar to this one, but we discovered that as we were inputting our information into the template. So you can just see some changes here. So total operating expenditures of 6.1, total revenue of 60 million bucks, leaves us with a $680,000 board approved targeted deficit. Now, so the budget template. So the budget template that was in the agenda has changed slightly. We submit our budgets to ministry staff for review just to ensure compliance, and there was a small change that came out. So the budget bylaw amount here is been updated to 73 million from is it 72 million?
So 72,961,274.
Excellent. Thanks, John. So there's about a $54,000 change in update, and really that was so that was a change in cost there. So to just point things out, again, one of the reasons why we ended up starting the year with a $1.1 million deficit really is reflected right here. 564. This is what we were projecting last year in the preliminary. We haven't seen this number a lot because once September came and we found out that we were 100 students down, we basically, as a district, the board, we committed to maintaining services, which meant an increased draw on deficit, on unrestricted reserves. So this year, we're anticipating 5,569 students. So it still is down. We're still feeling the effects of that, and that's why there were some reductions. So with this statement too, this is a consolidated statement. This reflects the capital, the operating, and the special purpose fund. You can see total revenue when you combine all three is up to 71 million, with total expenses at $72 million. And you can see the board committed draw on deficit of 680,000. So I'm not going to cover Schedule 2 again, or Schedule 2A. So this is basically the same as the budget comparison that just shared with you. There's a lot of nice detail here about the breakdown between the various categories. And but this one right here is pretty important, and it doesn't get a lot of attention, but it adds a substantial amount of services to the school district. So this is our special purpose fund, and these are dollars provided to the school district that are committed for a certain purpose, a certain spend. So we can only use these funds on required criteria. And if we don't spend it on that criteria, then it needs to stay in a reserve until it can be spent the next year with that. So we don't have everything identified, but here's just an idea of what we have. Strong Start, Ready, Set, Learn. Community Links is a substantial program, 551,000 to support students, nutrition, and other supports for at-risk students. Again, very substantial out of block funded program. This past year, like classroom enhancement has become a very big program. $2.3 million is what we're expecting to get next year. And we have a few other programs. Of course, this current year, 2021, we had the federal Safe Return to Class grant and the Provincial Safe Return to School grants that were also in here. So the thing with special purpose funding is when we receive it, because it's targeted and reserved, we only claim the revenue for what we spend. So you're not actually going to see a pretty big impact in any surplus with this, because if we don't spend it, it doesn't go to surplus, it actually just stays in this fund. But the total contribution of services to the school district from special purpose funds getting larger and larger every year. It's up to $7 million. So, it's, bigger than our schools when you add all of them together. And so it's definitely very nice to have those. And then the last schedule here is Schedule 4. This is the capital. Again, there's a lot of estimates on here. What this schedule shows really are just the amortization and the expenses that we incur through our capital program. So amortization, we show of deferred of capital. So this is money, the grant money that we receive to build our capital. We amortize it, it shows up as revenue. On the asset purchase side, we have, so when we build a school or add a capital asset, then we amortize it, it shows up as an expense. That's most of it, but we'll have other expenses that will be run through here. So for instance, when we get our annual facility grant money from the government, if there's an asset that we can't capitalize, we run it through here as an expense, and we'll have to show the offsetting revenues for it. So just, you'll see capital lease on here, some small transfers over from operating. And so, if you see anything big here, so amortization is the big thing. If we were transferring funds from operating to build a new school at $1 million a year, you would see that here as well. But you aren't seeing anything like that. Our purchases from local capital are very small, and our transfers are also very small. So, but this, even though it's capital, it does roll into that very front statement, and that encompasses statement 2 and statement 3 encompass the entire operations of School District 72. So I think from there I can stop sharing and ask if anybody has questions. Yes.
Trustee Hagan, you're muted.
I have 3 questions. I would imagine that next year's startup is going to be quite tight, that we can't expect the same kind of funds in kind of reserves so that we can throw it at the beginning of school. It may take longer to build our classrooms. Is that true?
Yes. So because we had to adjust and basically move some of the expected underspent amounts from the final budget to the preliminary, means that we're going to have to be very fiscally conservative heading into next year. And what that means to operations, to staff and programs, is sometimes when an unbudgeted expense was brought forward, in the past couple of years, we've been able to say yes and to work that into the final, because we knew there would be an underspent. Heading into this next year, we won't be able to do that because we've already claimed some of that expected savings.
Right.
So there are 2 items that we're waiting on to see exactly what the impact is next year. We are waiting on both the September 30th student count. You had noticed or pointed out that we are expecting to be lower than we were last year for the preliminary. If we end up better than what we expect, then that will provide some additional funds that we may be able to then start planning with. The other item as well is just how we finish off this year this year's fiscal performance. So we are anticipating a draw on surplus of 1.5 million. If we end up better than that, so a draw on surplus of 500,000 or even a small surplus, then that will have a pretty significant impact on what we can look at going forward next year as well. So we're going to have to start the year off much more conservative than we typically have. And, you know, in most years, I would prefer not to have drawn the estimates, but this year, considering the state that we're in, that the stage that we're at for the budget process, this was the recommendation that we made to proceed with, again, just some caution heading into next year. And it also allowed us to preserve the stakeholder input and changes and recommendations that came in, so we didn't have to change it. But again, we will have to be cautious next year.
So perhaps in our startup this next year, it would be good to have another reminder that it's not going to be as quick, it's not going to be as easy for classrooms, for teachers, for everyone involved, that to put the classes together is going to be really important, because right now we're not laying off a lot of people. We're not changing programs to try to find that money. We've actually dipped into our reserves to the max that we had allowed, and that in the you know, when we start up again, that there has to be some understanding that there's a way way off here. You know, you can't have it both ways. The second one is what is our structural deficit at this point as we move forward? I know we're trying to eliminate that so we're not always drawing on our reserves, but the budgets change all the time. But at the present time, what is our structural deficit?
So the structural deficit is still $1 million. So within the reductions that were made with this year's budget, one of the items for $100,000 was a structural reduction, but the other items were one-time reductions. So the benefit holiday was a one-time reduction, and the strategic priorities hopefully is a one-time reduction as well. So there still is a significant structural deficit, and that can be addressed in future years either with increased enrollment without the so increased enrollment, or by reducing spending.
Right, and how much is left in our reserves now?
So we will, the estimate is to be left with $1.4 million in the unrestricted reserve and about $500,000 in the emergency contingency.
Thank you.
Is that, those are your questions?
Those were my questions. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, well, tonight is the night that we have scheduled to pass the motion. To pass the motion tonight, we are going to have all three readings at this meeting. To proceed to that, we're going to have a unanimous motion to hold all three meetings, or all three readings at this meeting. So the proposed motion for that was that the board hold all required readings of the annual budget bylaw in the amount of $73,015,693 for the fiscal year 2021-22 at this meeting. Could we have someone to move that motion, please? Trustee Eddy, Trustee Hagan. Any discussion on this? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Okay, the motion is, oh, pardon me, any opposed? None? Okay, the motion is, okay. It's a long way from Sayward, so, okay, thank you. So the motion is passed unanimously. Okay, that's okay. I'll make, okay, stay on now so I can see you for the next three. Okay, so we are going to, we will then move to the three readings of the motion. And the first reading will be, or for the first reading, that the annual budget, pardon me, the annual bylaw budget, try that again. The annual budget bylaw in the amount of $73,015,000 $693,000. $693, I'm sorry. I'm having a rough time with this. I'll start it again. That the annual budget bylaw in the amount of $73,015,693 for the fiscal year 2021-22 pursuant to Section 113 of the School Act be and is hereby read for the first time. Could we have a motion for that one, please? Trustee Franklin, Trustee Wilson. Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Okay, the vote is unanimous, so that motion is passed. For the second reading, the motion is that the annual budget bylaw in the amount of $73,015,693 for the fiscal year 2021-22 pursuant to Section 113 of the School Act is hereby read for the second time. Could we have a motion for that, please? Okay, Trustee Eddy, Trustee Hagan. Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Okay, the motion is carried unanimously. Okay, for the third time, that the annual budget bylaw in the amount of, in the amount of $73,015,693 for the fiscal year 2021-2022 pursuant to Section 113 of the School Act be and is hereby read for the third time, passed and adopted. All those in, or pardon me, we have somebody, all those in favor, I'm sorry. No, do we have a mover for the motion? I'm sorry. Okay, Trustee Hagan, Trustee Franklin, or not, sorry, Trustee Briggs and Trustee Franklin.
I have a question.
All right.
I have
Yes.
a question.
Yes.
Yes, in addressing the budget, and we're going to take the vote now, I just wanted to say that the public input that we've had has been extremely helpful in making decisions. We have not reached in and laid off a lot of people in all this. Kevin Patrick and his team have worked extremely hard to get us to where we are. This is not an easy budget. And yet we still managed to put a little bit of money into some of the areas. And I would like to just say how much we appreciate the input that we've received from the public. And I believe this is the best that we can do with what we have. And I'd like to thank everyone involved.
Thank you. Okay. Any other comments? All those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. Okay, the motion is passed unanimously. Okay, there are no educational issues to be presented tonight, so we will move on to item 14, which is the capital plan bylaw, number 2021-22, CPSD 72-01. So, Secretary Treasurer Patrick.
Yes, I have another bylaw for the board to hopefully pass and support tonight. So I will go and share the screen. So we're happy that we recently received our capital plan, capital project approval letter from the Ministry of Education. So they are supporting a number of projects. They have publicly released some of the projects. Unfortunately, one project on here is embargoed, so I can maybe mention and but we can't show it. So basically, we submit for significant capital projects. We'll apply for funding from the ministry. They have a very significant process to go about comparing, rating, and approving projects. And typically, in any given year, we will receive funding for some projects, but our maintenance staff does a really good job of getting the data and information required so that the province can approve. And we actually, I believe next meeting, will be bringing forward our application for the 22-23 year. But the capital approval that we just received was for the 21-22 year. And we have been approved for $975,000 for Penfield roofing upgrade, $248,000 for the Carey High HVAC upgrade. And again, these ones, CNCP, hugely beneficial because it saves us a lot of money on energy. So both reduces our carbon footprint as well as results in fiscal savings and really better quality. And wherever there's an opportunity when doing an HVAC upgrade to improve the building, paint, we also take advantage of those opportunities. So, so some of these projects, there's a lot of acronyms here. So SEP was the School Enhancement Program. We received the roofing upgrade. CNCP is a carbon neutral capital program, again, intended to reduce. Now, this one right here is blank, but there actually is something in here. We have been approved for a playground, but it's embargoed, and it's important that the board approve this bylaw tonight because it gives us access to the money, but they have asked us not to discuss this. So, so it is it's an updated amount for a playground that has been provided, $186,000. So with the latest provincial budget, they did increase, and they must be planning some press release for this, but they will contact the media and possibly the board when that occurs. And then we also have been approved for some buses. And again, the benefit of getting bus approvals is as our buses get older, the repairs and maintenance get really expensive, like in the tens of thousands of dollars per bus per year. So, so it's always nice that the ministry supports bus replacements. We are on a regular schedule. Some years we get more than others. I think in one year we got 6, and in some years we get none. But so now, so the total approved projects this year, we don't have a total, and the board doesn't have to approve a total, but the total approved projects that we received this year was $1.923, like $1.9 million. So again, pretty nice contribution to our schools. Of course, we are applying for other things like school additions and seater replacements, and so I would say very small portion of what we asked for gets approved, but again, these two items right here will have a pretty big positive impact. And of course, playgrounds, whenever those are done, helps transfer the burden from what used to be funded by PACs to government funding. So that is our, that is our capital. And I am just trying to unshare and see if there's any questions. And we do have a bylaw as well to seek approval.
Does anyone have any questions? So Secretary Treasurer Patrick. Okay, hearing none then. Just as we did with the budget bylaw, to pass this bylaw, the capital plan bylaw, we will need to have a unanimous motion unanimously passed to hold all 3 readings at this meeting. So the proposed bylaw, or pardon me, the proposed motion is the capital plan bylaw number 2021/2022, CPSD 72-01 for projects identified in the May 11, 2021 capital plan response letter from the Ministry of Education be given all 3 readings at this meeting. Can we have a mover for this motion? Trustee Franklin, Trustee Eddy. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, the motion is passed unanimously. Okay, so we'll go to the readings of the motions. That the capital plan bylaw number 2021-22 CPSD 72-01 for projects identified in the May 11, 2021 capital plan response letter from the Ministry of Education is hereby read. for the first time. Can we have a mover for that, please? Trustee Franklin, Trustee Hagan. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hands. Okay, the motion is passed unanimously. We'll move to the second one, that the capital plan bylaw number 2021/22 CPSD 72-01 for projects identified in the May 11, 2021 capital plan response letter from the Ministry of Education is hereby read for the second time. Okay, we'll move by Trustee Eddy, Trustee Briggs. Okay. Okay, all those in favor of the motion? Okay, raise your hands. Okay, the motion is carried unanimously, passed unanimously. And finally, that the capital plan bylaw number 2021/22 CPSD 72-01 for projects identified in the May 11, 2021 capital plan response letter from the Ministry of Education is hereby read for the third time, passed and adopted. Moved by Trustee Franklin, Trustee Eddy. Fast hands tonight. Okay, all those in favor of the motion, raise your hands. Okay, the motion again is passed unanimously. All right, well, thank you very much for that. Dealt with a lot of money
Yes,
things.
thank you, everybody.
Okay, so there are no committee reports or any other business, so we will move to questions from anyone present on agenda items for this evening. And I don't see, oh, there you are, Ms. Patrick. Do you have, or do we have any questions?
So while we're waiting, that board meeting schedule is proposed to set the dates, but I guess the big question will be whether we're in person or not at that time, and I guess we'll be still following the public health guidelines. And at this point, it was scheduled or structured not to support either one. To support whether it's a virtual or in person.
My understanding is that we will be receiving guidance on, I think, June 15th. There is a plan out, and I think that the plan says that 10 people can meet. Up to 10 people can meet, if I read it correctly. I suspect that things will be different in September. I certainly hope they would. I mean, as much as I enjoy seeing everyone's face on the Teams meeting screen, it just seems so much better to see people in person. So I'm hoping that we can get back to meeting in person again as we have previously. Okay, I've been informed by Jennifer Patrick that we have not had any questions up to this point. I think if we were going to have questions, we would have had them by now. So I'm going to request a motion to adjourn. Trustee Hagan, all those in favor, please raise your hands. Okay, the motion is carried. We are done for the evening. Thank you very much.